Thank you, Marie, for that great introduction. And yeah, we're all very grateful for your organisation and administration. I'm starting to feel better now because once you start to do the talk, you feel less nervous about having to wait. I'm a little bit less nervous too because Father Ledenish is not here, so he can't correct me. Although there are other Thomists in the room who might correct me. Okay, so when I get towards the end of this talk, it might not be as well-rounded as it could be because this is the first time that I've delivered this. So I've been thinking about this topic. That is the question of whether there are extraterrestrials, in particular in relation to the Catholic faith. Are they compatible or not? I just would like to start by putting a few of my cards on the table about that. I don't believe that there are extraterrestrials. My view is that I don't think it's ultimately, I think if you really unpack what the Catholic faith is and really dive into it, I don't think that the existence of extraterrestrials is compatible with our faith. However, I wouldn't say it's heretical. There are other categories that the seminarians would know about, I'm sure, that come under heretical. Like one of them from memory is something can be offensive to pious ears. Ask them about the other ones. They should know. Do you know? Anyway, I think that the hypothesis of aliens existing is not heretical, but it is problematic. There are actually some Catholic theologians who tend toward the view or are outspoken about the view that they might exist and that God might have made them and that we might need to accommodate that in how we think about the Catholic faith. And that's not my view. All right. How does Aquinas deal with this? Well, Aquinas, as far as I'm aware, doesn't explicitly address this question because so much has changed between then and now in terms of how we understand the universe, popular culture as well, that even if it's, I guess, natural and understandable that we think about aliens a lot, the culture and the status of science back then was quite different. So they wouldn't have been thinking about it. But the main reason is the universe, and I mean the physical universe that Aquinas believed in was geocentric, okay? So, and a lot of it came from Aristotle, and on Aristotle's model, which was then adapted through a fellow called Ptolemy, you'd had the Earth in the center, and then you had the various planets going in circles around the Earth in concentric spheres. And a very important division that Aristotle has, and also Aquinas, is that corruptible and movable things are all on the Earth, and above the moon, everything, nothing out there is corruptible or moving or movable. And so that means there's nowhere to put aliens in that system because everything that moves and is alive and is corruptible has to be on the Earth. And there's really no room for another Earth anywhere in that system. So that's why it doesn't come up for him. Okay. So where am I going with this paper today? Well, it's actually a really interesting topic, the perfection of the universe. Now, when we normally think about God creating each of us and each of the things on Earth, each of the stars, we think mostly just about the fact that God creates every individual thing. And being good Thomists, we would all think that everything has its own purpose, its own teleology. So remember, teleology is the tendency of a thing towards its own perfection, its own telos. the end, okay? Now, that's all correct, but what we tend to ignore or not think about is that for Aquinas and even Aristotle, the universe as a whole has a telos, has its own perfection. So what I'm recommending that we do is don't just think about individual creatures and how they have their own teleology, but think about the universe as a whole as having its own perfection that is willed by God. Okay? And for Aquinas, there is an order of the universe. An order of the universe. That's how things work together toward the same end. Different parts are adapted to each other and enhance each other. There's interdependence. So there's the two concepts I'm going to talk about. One, the perfection of the universe. Two, the unity and order of the universe. The third is what I'm going to call cosmic humanism. Cosmic humanism. So we need to be a little bit careful about the word humanism because often people will associate that with secular humanism, but I don't mean that. I just mean that the human intellect, as was said before us, is key in the universe. There's something central about the human being in the whole universe. I'm going to call that cosmic humanism, okay? And there are three concepts that Aquinas has. And what I'm going to do, or at least attempt to do, is explore those concepts in Aquinas and then argue that the idea of there being extraterrestrial life, i.e. Intelligent embodied beings somewhere else in the universe, doesn't actually fit in this picture. And I'll try and explain why. And a key part of the argument is that the particular order of this universe centers on man, and by that I mean the human person, male and female, and comes together at a single point. And at that single point, man gives voice to the truth and the form and all the order of the universe through his intellect, okay? And also through his intellect and will relates everything back to God in gratitude, in worship, and so forth. So on this picture, there's one mediating point between the universe and God, and that is man. Not just individual men, but man as a species. If you were to add into that equation, or try to add into that equation, another intelligent species somewhere else, then what you're going to have is two of these mediating points, all right? And Aquinas would say, well, that disturbs the unity of the universe. And we'll go into more details there later. Hopefully when this is uploaded, I can add a couple of references here, but I'll just mention them. There's a great book by Mari George called Christianity and Extraterrestrials, A Catholic Perspective, Mari George. That's available as an ebook quite cheaply. That's a very good book on the topic. There's a great article by Father Thomas Weinandy, OFM, Weinandy, W-E-I-N-A-N-D-Y. And it's just a short article explaining his arguments from a theological point of view why aliens don't exist. It's called Of Jesus and Aliens. But the work that I've drawn on a lot for this paper is by a man called Oliver Blanchette. Oliver is O-L-I-V-A, Blanchette. And it's called The Perfection of the Universe According to Aquinas. That is a marvelous book, and it's It's got great scholarship, and I'll be drawing a lot on that today. So there is a lot of, if you do a bit of searching on Google, maybe even YouTube, you will find people talking about this topic from both points of view. If you want to look more into arguments against the compatibility of aliens and the Catholic faith, there are a couple of exorcists who say some of the apparent or reported encounters with aliens are, in their view, actually demonic influences. So that's an interesting thing if you want to look up. All right. So I'll just start the paper itself. We're going to eventually look at the Summa Theologica Part 1, Prima Pars. Question 47. We're going to look at that in a moment. In Article 3, Aquinas addresses the question of whether there is only one world. Mundus is the Latin. The article begins with a statement, videtur quod non sit unus mundus tantum sed plures, that translates as, it would seem that there is not only one world, it would seem that there is not only one world, but many. And if you're familiar with his writing in the Summa, you'd know that if the article starts with, it would seem that X, he actually believes the opposite. So the way that it works, it works very well. He lists at least 3 usually, sometimes 5, 6, arguments why it seems X. It seems that this is true, and then he gives his own view, which is the opposite, and then he responds to all the objections. So Aquinas lists 3 arguments for the claim that there are many worlds. At the end of the article, Aquinas responds to the 3 arguments. His own position is that there is only one world, so one mundus, that's the Latin word, or cosmos, to use the Greek term. So in his view, the entire physical universe coincides with a single cosmic system. And at the center of this cosmic system is the Earth. In the centuries preceding Aquinas, the Church Fathers unanimously took the same view. Origen is the one exception, and I'll explain why later. So, as you may have guessed, what I'm going to do is run through this argument after giving some context and background. The argument why he says there's only one world, what he means by that. And then I'm going to relate that and extrapolate from it why I think that would imply that there can't be other aliens, given the principles that he's used, particularly the principle of the perfection of the universe, the centrality of man, and the unity and order of the universe. We have to be careful when we use words, with our use of words when we're doing philosophy, because we have to be precise. When we say universe, what we mean usually is all physical things, including particles and energies, okay? And that's how I will use the term. But Aquinas uses the term in a different way. So for him, universe signifies all things created by God, including the angels. So all things. When we say universe, we don't tend to think of the angels, okay? There's 2 reasons for that. One is a lot of people don't believe in angels, and the other is that, well, that's just the way we refer to the universe, just the physical universe. All right, so the word universe for Aquinas isn't just all creatures, but it's understood as gathered together in a totality, an ordered whole, all coming together for a single purpose and related to each other in interdependence. In this all-encompassing unity, there is still a distinction between things. So it's not a simple unity, obviously. It's not, and It's not that everything is dissolved together into a soup of some sort, but different individuals are stay distinct, and different species stay distinct. And even with those differences and oppositions, they're brought together in a complex unity. But he points out that it's not an organism. The universe is not an organism because it doesn't have a soul that, the universe does not have a soul. So I'm going to speak of the physical universe and distinguish that from the greater universe. So greater universe is just my way of saying, well, including the angels, everything that exists, everything that has been created. So I've coined a term called cosmic monism, and that is the view that there is one world, one mundus, one cosmos. And I'm going to explain in a moment what I mean by cosmos, world. And the opposite view is cosmic pluralism. That means there are many worlds, many cosmoi. And in a moment, I'm going to explain those views and put them in the historical context. So, excuse me. What is cosmic pluralism? So that's the idea that in our universe, physical universe, there are countless cosmoi. Cosmoi is the plural of the Greek word cosmos. We don't say cosmoses. So cosmos is often translated into English as world, but that can be ambiguous and misleading. Sometimes it's translated as universe, but that doesn't actually help us much in this context. So here's an important point. The cosmos, as I'm using the term, and as they are using the term, is an ordered system of stars and other heavenly bodies with an Earth-like body at the center. So it's a geocentric system. The emphasis in this concept is, of course, order. And cosmos is an ancient Greek word. In the ancient Greek context, and then in the patristic, and then the medieval worlds, to say that there are multiple cosmoi is to say that our cosmos, with the Earth in the center, is not the only cosmos. If you were to subscribe to cosmic pluralism, you would say that our cosmos, which encompasses the Earth and all the heavenly bodies that we see in the night sky, they'd say our cosmos is not the only cosmos in the totality of matter and space. There are countless others. Since everything we see in the night sky is by definition part of this cosmos, that means the other cosmoi are completely beyond our experience. So the theory that there are other cosmoi has to be a metaphysical theory. It can't be something that is observed. So who came up with this idea? It was actually the atomists. The atomists were ancient Greek philosophers who said that there is a void. There is a void and there are atoms, and that's it. There's atoms just going around randomly in the void, and they come together and form beings, and then they come together more to create the world and so forth. And I can't remember which of the two atomists said this first. There was Democritus and Leucippus and Epicurus. One of them came up with the view that there's an infinite number of atoms. Infinite number of atoms. There's no limit to it. And also the void goes out in all directions forever. And because there's an infinite number of atoms and they're always moving, eventually they're going to come together and form a cosmos. So there's going to be an Earth-like body in the center, and there's going to be the different layers and so forth. the different spheres. And so they would say that in that infinite expanse of the void and atoms, different cosmoi are formed. And it's good to keep in mind that the atomists did not believe in an intellectually imposed order. They believed that random movements, material processes explained everything. Okay, and so that was quite different to obviously the Christian view, but it's different to what Plato and Aristotle believed, because they definitely said that there are forms and there is an intellect at work to create order in the universe and in the cosmos. So cosmic pluralism can be thought of a multiplication of the geocentric view. Before Copernicus and Galileo came along at the dawn of the modern age, it was thought that the Earth is physically at the centre of the universe. There was a certain fellow called Aristarchus of Samos in the 3rd century BC. He proposed that the sun is at the centre, like Copernicus did. But he wasn't able to prove it. In any case, the idea didn't catch on. So the dominant cosmological theory prior to Copernicus was the theory of Ptolemy, Ptolemy, from the 2nd century AD. So he had taken Aristotle's geocentric cosmology and expanded on it, developing a complex model of the universe in which the heavenly bodies revolve around the Earth in various concentric spheres. Can I have a glass of water, please, somebody? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So in Plato's cosmology, and then Aristotle's, and then Ptolemy's, the Earth is at the center of everything in the universe. In their view, the Earth is at the center of our cosmos, and our cosmos is the only cosmos, okay? Our cosmos coincides with the physical universe, the totality of everything that physically exists. But in cosmic pluralism, things are different. The Earth is not at the center of everything. The Earth is a center at this local cosmos. But there are other cosmoi, and they've got their own Earths. So in its original form, cosmic pluralism, thank you very much, was part of an ancient Greek metaphysical framework called atomism, as I explained before. Now, let me just say a couple of words about origin. This is by way of context. Something similar to cosmic pluralism was adopted by Origen of Alexandria. He was an extremely influential early Christian who lived between 185 and 235 AD. He was a Christian, but he had some strange ideas. Origen wasn't an atomist. He believed in God and the reality of spirit. He didn't reduce everything to matter and the void. Now, his idea was interesting. He didn't claim that there are multiple cosmoi existing simultaneously. His view was that there are multiple cosmoi, worlds, existing in series, one after the other. So his modified version of cosmic pluralism is different to the original in two ways. One, against materialism of the atomists, and in line with Christianity, Origen believed in God and the reality of spirit. The second difference is his multiple worlds exist not simultaneously, but one after the other, in series. And he said that God is the creator of each of them. God creates one, destroys that, creates another one, destroys that, creates another one. He has an interesting metaphysical argument for that. It's just briefly, it's because he said because God is purely active, that means the effects of God's activity have to be eternal. So there must be always a world. So therefore, there's a series of them. Now, there's another version of cosmic pluralism we have to consider. And so in theory, it's possible to believe in God and spirit and angels and claim that God created multiple worlds that exist simultaneously. So this is sort of Origen's view, but instead we're saying that all these cosmoi exist at the same time. I'm not aware of anyone actually having that view, but we need to understand it because that's the view that Aquinas is refuting. Now, it's important to know that these multiple cosmoi, they're not planets, they're not solar systems, they're not galaxies. They're the geocentric cosmic system of the pre-modern cosmology. So cosmic pluralism, and I've come up with two versions. One is the atomistic version of the atomist. That's an atheistic version and a materialistic version. And I've hypothesized there another version that you could propose, and that's a theistic version. They're actually both redundant worldviews. Why is that? It's redundant because it's based on geocentric cosmology. So, you know, geocentric cosmology has the Earth physically at the center of the whole universe. And cosmic pluralism agrees with that, but adapts it so that there are many of these geocentric systems. Okay, so very few people are geocentric cosmologists today. And even if someone does subscribe to geocentric view, they put the Earth at the center of their cosmic system, whereas in cosmic pluralism there are many. Okay. All right. So another historical point here, in the late medieval and Renaissance periods, Nicholas of Cusa and Giordano Bruno claimed that God made the universe with many worlds, but they weren't talking about geocentric systems. They were talking probably about planets or solar systems. A recent historical research has demonstrated that the primary reason that Bruno was burned at the stake in 1600 was actually his outspoken insistence that there are multiple solar systems, each of which is teeming with life. That's an interesting episode if you want to look into. Okay, so moving on to what the Church Fathers believed. They all said that cosmic pluralism is incompatible with the Catholic faith, even heretical. Part of it was because it was a materialist view, it was atomistic. Another part was that it meant that there wasn't any overall order in the universe, and that was against their Christian understanding of how God has ordered the universe. So there are statements against cosmic pluralism for no less than 8 Church Fathers, 7 of whom are revered as saints. There's St. Hippolytus of Rome, St. Athanasius, St. Epiphanius, St. Ambrose, St. Jerome, St. Augustine, and St. Isidore of Seville, and also Lactantius. In that list, there are 5 doctors of the church. So it becomes interesting. When I started looking at this, it becomes interesting. Why would there be so much unanimity in rejecting the idea of multiple worlds? There are 5 doctors of the church in that list: Athanasius, Ambrose, Jerome, Augustine, and Isidore of Seville. There's another early Christian writer who issued a statement of condemnation against cosmic pluralism, and that's St. Philastrius. He's not usually considered a church father, but his writings are important enough to be included in patristic collections. So let me explain something about the historical context of the Church Fathers' statements against cosmic pluralism. The Fathers weren't aware that the Earth is a planet orbiting the Sun. A planet is a moving body or a moving star, a wandering star. So they believed that the Earth was fixed. They weren't aware that the Earth and the other planets are all subject to the same laws of motion. They inherited Aristotle's widely accepted theory that the Earth is stationary and that all heavenly bodies, including the planets, exist in some fundamentally different realm, the heavenly spheres, and made of a different element compared to the Earth, ether. In rejecting cosmic pluralism, the fathers weren't making a statement about other planets. They knew that God had created many planets because they were aware of 5 wandering stars in the night sky. So planets were discovered through the visible eye because some of the stars, they don't stay on that circular path, they move about. And that's because, as we know, we're orbiting the sun. So they knew that God had created the visible planets to mark the seasons and to communicate to man through heavenly signs. They didn't know about Uranus and Neptune yet because they weren't visible to the naked eye. The other ones are. So, as I said, the father's rejection of cosmic pluralism, multiple worlds, was not a rejection of multiple planets. And Aquinas didn't reject the existence of multiple planets either. How far have we gone time-wise?
Well, it's fine. 4:15.
But how long have we gone?
We're probably about 3/4 of the way. Well, we didn't start just on 3:30, but yeah, we have got until 5 o'clock,
Okay.
Brendan, so plenty of
Okay.
time, as much as you'd like in that way.
No worries. So the many worlds that are affirmed in cosmic pluralism are not planets, they're not solar systems, and they're not galaxies. I'm sort of going off this, repeating this a bit much, sorry. Let's go to the next page. Now, Aquinas was not in a position himself to think about solar systems or galaxies. However, the cosmic monism of Aquinas and the Church Fathers is logically incompatible with the notion of multiple solar systems. So they weren't explicitly saying, are there solar systems? No, because they hadn't imagined what that would be. Nevertheless, their model doesn't actually fit with the idea of a solar system or galaxies or multiple galaxies and multiple solar systems. The idea that there might be other solar systems wasn't contemplated until after Copernicus, with Giordano Bruno and then Isaac Newton a century later. And just a fact on the side, it wasn't until 1992 that the existence of an exoplanet, so a planet beyond our solar system, was confirmed scientifically. Not long ago, was it? 1992. That's when we first realized that there is a planet beyond our solar system. What about galaxies? Well, Galileo in 1610 was the first to confirm by telescope that the Milky Way is a galaxy. That's a collection of lots of stars. The existence of other galaxies was first confirmed, when do you think?
The 20th century?
1923, by Edwin Hubble. I didn't know that myself. All right. So there's the historical context. I'll just have a drink.
Yes. Yes, never before you leave.
So at this point, one might be wondering why Aquinas' cosmology is even relevant today. After all, you might think, we know that his understanding of physics is false on a few accounts. Not his metaphysics, but physics, because there aren't just 4 fundamental elements, as Aristotle believed, by earth, water, and air. And yes, that was from Empedocles. I had a next sentence, but I'm afraid to say it now. I was going to say, nor is there a 5th element, ether, but I'm not sure if I can say that anymore. Nor are there distinct places in the cosmos towards which the 4 elements tend by nature. So it's not as if there's this element called earth that is attracted by nature toward this spot in the universe in the middle of the earth. So no one's going to be, nobody wants to adopt Ptolemy's geocentric model of the universe. They might, some people are geocentrics, geoeccentrics, geocentrics. They wouldn't adopt a Ptolemy's version of it. However, here's the crucial distinction to be made, and this leads on quite well to the previous talk. There's a distinction to be made between geocentrism and the view that the Earth and human beings are at the center of the universe symbolically or spiritually, because we're intellectual beings, spiritual beings, okay? So that's the direction I'm pushing today, is that we can agree with Aquinas that the Earth and human beings are symbolically central, spiritually central. So that's a sort of a spiritual sense of geocentrism that I adopt. The God-given meaning and purpose of the universe centers on man, the human person, male and female. That's my view. That's Aquinas' view. It is in man that the universe finds its truth and its perfection, because truth requires an intellect. If we imagine that there weren't angels and there weren't human beings or any intellectual beings, and God doesn't exist, there would be no truth. For this reason, the Earth is center stage in the universe, in a drama, the drama of salvation history. Okay, so yeah, the Earth is not in the center of the universe physically. I don't think the universe actually has a center physically. It's understandable that Christians in previous ages would have assumed that cosmic humanism goes hand in hand with geocentrism. So that was their motivation for holding on to geocentrism. According to the book of Genesis, as that's usually interpreted, the universe was made for man, male and female. Man is the one visible being made in the image of God, and man is the one visible being who is called into communion with God. You'll find that in the 1995 Catechism as well. So it seems logical to say that the Earth must also be physically at the center of the universe, and that all heavenly bodies must revolve around us. But given what we now know about the universe, it's no longer reasonable to think that geocentrism is true. You can still hold on to it. It's not against church teaching. So I think it's necessary to unlink cosmic humanism from geocentrism so that we can still hold on to cosmic humanism in our modern age. So our cosmological framework should be pre-modern in one important sense. Pre-modern insofar as we believe in the existence of God and an ordered universe, and that man is at the center spiritually. A framework should be modern in another sense, though, because we admit that the universe has no physical center. So it's a very fine balance to try and take parts of modern physics, but still synthesize that with the true parts of pre-modern cosmology. But as I indicated earlier, it's important that we get this humanism correct, because there are several errors associated with modern philosophy that we have to avoid. For example, the perfection of the human person should not be thought of in terms of a dualistic separation from the physical world, or from the natural law, or from the God-given order of the universe. So we need to integrate these things in our thoughts. Soul and body integrated, the human intellect having a fundamental relation to reality, objective reality, and the will being called to participate in the natural law and divine will. So what I was a little bit surprised, pleasantly surprised to read in Aquinas is that the perfection of the universe in an important sense is the same, or coincides with the perfection of man. Okay, so Without man, the universe as God has designed it wouldn't be perfect, it wouldn't be complete. So the universe is complete in man, not only in individuals, but in man as a society, or participating together in the common good. And Aquinas says that when God intended the universe, he had intended its perfection. So he had in mind what the perfection of the universe would be. And then Aquinas says to that, well, man is the central point of that. I've gone off track. I'm just going to come back to this point about humanism and avoiding modernistic errors. So we want to avoid Cartesian dualism. That's the soul-body split that of Descartes. We want to avoid voluntarism and existentialism. So Cartesian dualism thinks of the human soul and the human body as two independent substances. There's many problems with this. One is that on this view, the operations of the soul, knowing and willing, are not properly integrated with the realities of the body, the senses and the biological realities of the body. On top of that, another problem is that your intentional contact with and participation in objective reality through the intellect and will is undermined in that Cartesian picture. Voluntarism is the view that the will is separated off from truths that can be known intellectually. So the will is said to be its own law, its own measure. It doesn't respond to the natural law. It doesn't answer to divine law. It doesn't follow the attraction of objectively known goods. So if we're going to have a humanism, the idea that the human being has the greatest dignity in the physical universe and is central to the universe, we want to also avoid these atheistic versions of humanism that are problematic. Another version is existentialism, and I mean in particular as that's defined by Jean-Paul Sartre. And that denies that man has an essence or nature. It says that man doesn't have a teleological structure or God-given calling. So it's like we're a blank slate and we can just define ourselves however we decide. And so there's no universal pattern of human happiness or fulfillment. We just need to invent ourselves, okay? We want to avoid that. And we do that by thinking of the soul as the form of the body, and we have to think of the perfection of man, the happiness of man, in terms of his being in harmony with his own teleology, but also the teleology of the universe, which is an expression of the wisdom of God. So rather than think just of myself as fulfilling my own teleology, think of myself as a mediator, a receiver of the teleology of the whole universe, so that there is this fundamental relation between myself and all things in the universe, but the universe as a whole in particular. So what does that mean? That means that Aquinas says that in a certain sense, things are complete in a certain secondary sense by being known and by being loved. So as we know and love things and appreciate things, good things and beautiful things and intelligible things in the universe, we are in a sense completing them, bringing them to their fulfillment. And that happens inside us, in our intellects, and in an embodied way. What's the time now?
It is 4:27.
Okay.
So we can go a little longer, maybe some questions, and then we can always break for supper a little earlier.
Sure. Okay. So I'm going to go, as I promised, to that part in Summa Theologica, Prima Pars, question 47, article 3, whether there is only one world. It's on the other side. I'll go straight to what he answers. He says, the very order of things created by God shows the unity of the world. For this world is called one by the unity of order, whereby some things are ordered to others. But whatever things come from God have a relation of order to each other and to God himself. Hence, it must be that all things should belong to one world. So I'm just going to stop there. There's more. What Aquinas is saying is that God is wise and intelligent, and what he creates it with order. God wouldn't just create chaos or something disordered. And he understands order in this way. There are some things which are ordered to others. I want to go into the details of that a bit more. Here's some examples. So minerals are ordered to the life of plants. The life of plants are ordered to the life of animals. The life of animals are ordered to human life. Because humans, we rely on proteins and the other minerals and so forth, and nutrients that come from animals. Animals rely on what they get from plants, and plants obviously use things from the soil, minerals from the soil, as well as water and light and air. So we can add to that picture the things like light and water and air. So they're all interdependent and ordered to each other. And then man in turn is ordered towards God. And so that grand picture of things being ordered to each other, Aquinas calls a unity of order, a totality. Now, what he's saying is if God created one cosmos here and another cosmos here, this whole thing doesn't have order because this is independent from this. Another way of putting it is that this would have one telos or one perfection. This cosmos would have a different perfection, but they wouldn't come together under one perfection together. Okay. I'll just add a third point to that. Aquinas says that there is an external end and also an internal end for each thing. So when it comes to a creature that God creates, it has its own internal end, particularly if it's a living thing. That's its own completion, perfection in itself, but it's also ordered toward God. And he uses that distinction when he talks about the perfection of the universe. Perfection of the universe internally, its internal completion is the ordering of all the parts to each other, and particularly how man in knowing and loving the things in the universe completes the universe internally. But there's also the whole things being ordered toward God. And for Aquinas, that external finality, its relation to God, is primary and more important, and that determines the internal teleology. So, based on that distinction, if we imagine that there is one cosmos here, cosmos A, and another cosmos here, cosmos B, they could, in theory, both be ordered toward God. They would have the same external finality, if you like, but they wouldn't have a common internal finality. So what Aquinas is saying is that the world as a whole has to have a united internal finality, a united telos. And that is the basis of his belief that there's only one world. He doesn't deny that God could create another world. in this respect. So, and then he says, the people who assert that there are many worlds do not acknowledge any obtaining wisdom, but rather believe in chance. That's the atomistic view. As Democritus, who said that this world, besides an infinite number of other worlds, was made from a casual concourse of atoms. So what he's saying is that if you believe that there are other worlds, you have to believe that there's no overall order to the universe. I'm just going to sort of ad-lib the last 5 minutes or so, just to fill in some other final points. So one argument for there being multiple cosmoses, multiple worlds, would be that more is better. God is generous, so it's better if he expresses himself by creating more. And Aquinas says, yes, but he says, diversity is not our strength. He's saying diversity as such is not good. There has to be an overall unity. So diversity is good as long as it's part of an overall harmony, a harmonized, ordered whole. Okay? So it wouldn't be good just to have more worlds. They'd have to have an overall order that unites them. All right? I haven't left myself enough time to really go into how that affects our, the existence, possible existence of extraterrestrials. But my intention is to try and then translate that into why Aquinas wouldn't believe in other intelligent beings, and it's because of the overall unity. So, one, it's redundant. We've already got an intelligent being in whom the universe is complete and perfect. Two, if there's another species of intelligent being, how does the order stay united? Are we going to have those aliens ordered to us, which means they'd be like our slaves? Or are we going to be ordered to them, so we'd be their slaves? Or are they both going to be ordered to something higher? But that higher thing would have to be an internal end. So metaphysically speaking, it's hard to see how that could be an ordered universe. And my hypothesis or my suspicion is that because we've lost the sense of finality, because we don't think of the universe in terms of an overall teleology and design or order, and because I guess we're obsessed with diversity and we think that more is better, that gives us an inclination to think that, okay, maybe aliens do exist. But if we start applying some of these metaphysical principles of Aquinas, we might have more hesitation about that idea. Thank you.
Fantastic.